Good afternoon and welcome to the special City Council meeting of the City of International Falls, Wednesday, September 26, 2018. Purpose of the special meeting is to consider financial services agreement with Northland Securities, review and discuss the proposed preliminary 2019 budget and property tax levy, and adopt a resolution approving the 2019 preliminary budget and levy. With that, move to item 1. Consider the financial services agreement with Northland Securities Incorporated. City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. We had a conversation at the last Budget and Finance Committee meeting about taking advantage of the services of a financial advisor to assist us in some of the preliminary analysis for the proposed local option sales and use tax. And in the past, we've worked with Northland Securities, so I contacted Mr. Erlitzen, who is George Erlitzen, actually is how you pronounce it. He's from the range. He's Senior Vice President with the firm. He does some of their field work, and he's provided a copy of this financial planning agreement, which outlines the services that Northland Securities could provide for us, essentially to prepare and provide some financial impacts on the taxpayers based on this proposed sales tax legislation and the financial impacts that the project might have without sales tax authority, and then just help us with some preparation materials for presentation to the council and then to take any actions that we'll have to on the referendum. I do want to explore with them to see what other kinds of analyses they've done for other communities that might be clients of theirs and have chosen to pursue a sales and use tax. So we want to have this agreement executed between the city and Northland Securities. You can see that Northland Securities has already signed it. There's no compensation due to them unless we would move forward, and if we move forward with the issuance of bonds to finance the project, that's when they would receive their first compensation. So recommending that we move forward with this planning agreement so we can work with them to.
So moved.
Motion by Councilor Jacksaw to approve the financial services agreement with Northland Securities Incorporated and authorize the signatures.
I'll second.
Second by Councilor Droba. Discussion on the motion or the agreement. Hearing no discussion, question.
Aye.
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 I would vote yes. Motion is carried. Agreement is approved and with the signatures. Thank you. Item number 2 under new business for the special City Council meeting is to review and discuss the proposed revisions to the preliminary 2019 budget and property tax levy. The Administrator, do you want to lead the council through those changes, or do you want the chair of the budget?
Mr. Chairman, just to briefly outline, what we've provided for you again is we had a meeting at the Budget and Finance Committee. There were some reductions proposed at that meeting, so our finance officer has incorporated those reductions into a new line item budget and a new Exhibit A, which was distributed to you this afternoon. So we've identified those, and I think one of the things I would just say by way of my summary, without going through each individual reduction that was made by the Budget and Finance Committee, is you can see that the appropriations for the various partnership organizations that we've referred to them in the past, you can see Music in the Park is $1,000. And again, I'm looking at the Exhibit A document, which is a summary and attached to the resolution that you will be asked to pass today. So the Senior Center has $2,000. That's a reduction from $3,500 last year. The Bronco Foundation has an allocation of $31,000. Citizens for Bacchus AB $60,000, and then KCC TV $5,000, and the total for those appropriations is $99,000. We've had some other discussions. The airport city share is $461,190. That's higher than it has been in the past. because of the projects that are underway and proposed with runway rehabilitation, as well as the, actually for the Phase 2 terminal project, there's no local share required for that, so this would be an increase due primarily to the proposed runway improvements that will take place in 2019. We reduced the Forest Hill Cemetery Association contribution of $10,000 to zero for this year. We don't show anything for the Second Creek grant local match from the City of International Falls. Then the Recreation Commission allocation is $82,000, and that is an increase from last year. I think it was $72 or $71.5 last year. So the total for those other would be $543,190. The net impact of the adjustments that were made at the last Budget and Finance Committee is that the total levy for 2019 is proposed to be $3,498,261. That is an increase of $937,285 over last year, and a percentage increase of 36.6%. The last comment I would just make, and it's again shown on Exhibit A, is that there was a slight increase in the local government aid that is allocated to the city, and that increase is $5,865 for 2019. The total for 2019 would be $4,129,956. Again, an increase of $5,865. The latest reports that we're getting from the League of Minnesota Cities is that the state revenues are ahead of what's projected in the budget, so I think that there's little possibility that our local government aid would be unallocated in 2019 just based on status at the present time.
I think we should also point out, because the chamber isn't specifically stated in our appropriations list, but that $49,000 in row 809 is the chamber.
It was $49,000 even.
$49,000 even, yeah, that's what I said. 809 is the
In Fund
account.
809, I'm sorry, I thought you
809
were,
is the
yes.
account. Yeah, I just think, I see the chamber here, so they...
Well, I must say I'm not supportive of a 36% increase in the levy. I think we need to find a way to reduce that further. I think a reasonable increase on our citizens, 5%, something of that nature, but I'm certainly not going to support a 36% increase in our levy.
May I can't support it either. 36% is ridiculous, and we ultimately sat here and we cut through the budget, and we were able to cut $60,000 out of the budget on a first swipe, and that was cutting organizations that we've been part of in the past. That's cutting some small pieces out of our public works. That was cutting pieces out of our ambulance department, our fire department, capital outlay for future improvements. And those are problems that we're facing now. In the past, we have many city councils. Not this one, not the last one, not the one before that. Many city councils have pushed off our public works and our improvements. So that's how we got into this bind that we're in right now. So what are we going to cut? I can't support the 36, and I completely understand. There's no way we do a 36% tax levy. But where do we make our cuts? We're already pretty bare bones in most of our departments, as much as we can be, to still be able to provide the services that our citizens are asking. Where do we make our cuts? Because I know where I'm fairly certain the cuts are going to come from. They're going to come from our Public Works Department, which is exactly what has gotten us into this issue right now. And I know that this may or may not be a popular opinion, But as we are working as a city to try to fund our city government and our fire, our safety, our EMTs, our police officers, and our public works and our streets, I find it really, really disheartening that we are cutting from our own city, but yet we still continue to give appropriations to outside entities that are not taking cuts. And I strongly believe that if we're going to be cutting from our own city departments, we really, really need to be looking at cuts in the other entities that we give money to. It's $99,000 that we're giving to outside entities. Just my thoughts.
Mr. Mayor?
Please.
First, I want to thank Councilor Droba for the hard work as finance chair in reviewing this budget. It really was Harley that came up with the $60,000 we were able to squeeze out. In order to get this to a 10% levy increase, we're looking at cutting $640,000. Ultimately, I would like to say, this is where I'm basically coming from, is that we can't, I agree with the mayor, we can't raise the levy 35%. It's not tenable. I can't vote for that. But I do want to say that at this point, and we're going to have to look at the P&I budget. There is no way that we can't. We're not going to find $640,000 just to reduce the levy to 10% without taking cuts out of there. I think, and correct me, Mr. I thought we had $1 million in P&I approximately. 500,000 of that was for the Highway 53 Task Force, and 500,000 was for city streets and infrastructure. Am I correct?
We didn't have it laid out specifically for that, but essentially that is correct. Yeah. Street improvements, bituminous paving hit $500,000 allocated for that, which would go towards that Highway 53 project, and our total in PI was $1,445,000 requested in 2019.
For infrastructure improvements.
Okay, I think if we, ultimately, our tax base has shrunk, you know. One of the reasons is the valuation of and the tax law that was passed at the state legislature. One of the reasons our tax capacity has been cut is that handout I provided to almost everybody here today on the history of just the base mill in the city limits. So in 1998, those tax revenues were almost $3.5 million. Today, they're less than $1 million. So that's year over year, ultimately, from 1998, a $2 million loss per year. We have been in this bind for quite some time. I do not think it's fair to say to the people that serve on this council that we have not done our due diligence. The mayor's here night and day. We've sat here at meetings and looked at this. We are not going to solve our problem without expanding our tax base, period. Just not going to happen. That's the reality. We aren't going to come up with this money. So either we have infrastructure improvements and expand our tax base, or we just let the city crumble. That's the way I see it. And therefore, we need to be creative, and we need to think about how other cities have solved this problem. Because the tax policy in the state has put the crunch not just on International Falls, but on 35 other cities who have taken the bull by the horns and figured out how to expand their tax base. So what I say is, we put this up to the voters as to whether we're going to have infrastructure improvements or not. And today, we put our levy at a 10% increase. We find half of that, $500,000 in P&I. I would say this as well. The operational expenditures at the airport have increased by approximately $40,000. I want to send the message to the airport that it is time for them to consider how to fund those operations. Back in the day, in 1960 and 70, the city itself had 50% of the tax base of the county. Today it has 22%. We cannot continue on this path, period. So what I want to do is cut $40,000 out of the airport budget and send the message that you find the revenues there to subsidize the operations. That's $540,000 that we're at. We're still off $100,000 just to get the levy to 10%. Now, the other way to do this is to lobby your legislators and look for greater equity in what industrial America is going to contribute to the economic pie and commonwealth of this country. But, you know, that's beyond my job description. But, you know. So, I'm going to make a motion that we set the levy at a preliminary levy at 10%. We're still not going to arrive there without further cuts. We set the preliminary levy at 10%. We cannot raise it after today, but we can drop it. So I understand the mayor to say that he was more in favor of something at the 5% range. I just think if we're going to do the Highway 53 project, I don't know how we can get to 5%. So, and the Highway 53 project is critical to the face of this town and the psychology and community spirit of this city. So I'm really not going to vote to cut that out. So, you know, right now I'll say 10%. I make a motion that we set our preliminary levy rate at 10%.
I'll accept your motion, Councillor Jacksaw, that we set the city levy at 10%. Is there a second to the motion? Please. Point of order?
Please, just semantics. So you're saying set the levy at 10%. I presume that the intent of Councillor Jackson is
Set the increase.
increase the levy by
Levy,
10%
that's what I
over the
meant. Thank you.
2018 levy amount.
Thank you.
10% increase,
Yeah,
yes.
10% increase. With the idea that we can come down, but we can't go up, of course.
Second time, is there a second to the motion? For a third time, is there a second to the motion? Hearing no second to the motion is lost for lack of a second. Back to review and discussion of the budget. A couple of comments. Certainly agree with Councillor Jacksaw. We need to do the Highway 53 project, and our plan was to budget approximately half of the funds for 2019 and the other half in 2020. So we weren't going to, the expected share that the city has is about 1.2 million that we need to have for that project. 5 or 6 million will come from the state to complete that project, but the city share would be approximately 1.2 million, and so we were looking to put aside about 500,000 this year. We would have to come up with probably 700,000 or more in 2020. And with the hope that maybe the sales tax question would pass, the legislature would approve it, and we would be able to collect some monies there to help with that project. I also have concerns, and you note down on the Exhibit A that the This is probably the first time in over 40 years that the city has not contributed or will not have contributed money to the Forest Hill Cemetery Association. We have annually contributed $10,000. I don't know what that will do to that association and their budget. It could be a problem for them and ultimately the citizens of the area. I would also caution you, Councillor Jacksaw, that the airport isn't them. The airport is us. We're half of the airport. So please understand that it isn't speaking to the airport with that pronoun them. Us. So.
I guess I don't feel there's much us in it, though, because as far as the council goes, because we really have not been a part of that budget process. Pretty much take it or leave it when it comes to council.
Well, certainly two members, Councillor Briggs and myself, have been on that and trying to work every opportunity that we get to secure more funds for that airport. Reducing costs in every way, and that's working with the FAA and working with MnDOT and other organizations, increasing rents to the TSA, to the National Weather Service, looking for funds wherever we can. And I know under at the top of Exhibit A, under 101, the general government, I know we've cut as Councillor Droba spoke earlier. We've taken some money out of Public Works, some out of Fire. We've reduced a number of those, but unless we're willing to really cut deeper in those, I don't know where we would, where they would end up. We're still going to have to plow streets this coming winter and take care of other issues that the city has. We certainly need police, administration, fire services. So I think the only place that we can cut is in 401 permanent improvement and reduce the levy down to I don't know what 5%, City Administrator, could you enlighten us to what 5% would generate given the tax base of the city presently?
$125,000.
128, that's correct. $128,049.
And the increase in the airport request is $140,000. So that levy increase doesn't even cover the increase at the airport. We can't do a 5% levy increase. It's not feasible.
Last year we did 9%, I believe it was. Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor.
I feel sad that, look at young people like Joe and Harley and Emma and Betty. And maybe Brad, you're in that group, I don't know. But, at one time this town was very strong economically, and it had quite a few more people, and a high school graduating class 3 times larger than the one we have now. What has my generation left the kids here? I think we were short-sighted in some of the policy decisions we made over the decades, and things finally come home to roost. I want the best for the kids of this city. We need to have infrastructure. We need to try to make our city bigger and better for our kids. Just how I feel right now, I'm feeling very sad.
City Administrator, if the levy that we have on Exhibit A is $3,498,261, and that is $937,000 increase at 36%.
A dollar increase of, yes, that's correct.
So if we were to increase by 5%, 128,000, we would subtract 128,000 from the 937, which would leave about 810,000 balance the budget. So we would need to remove about 810,000 from the 1,445,000 in order to balance the budget with the levy.
Talking specifically out of the PI budget, that would be correct.
Mayor, I see where you're going with this, and it gives me some major concerns, and I understand that if we pull the money from the capital improvement, that's the money that we're setting aside, that's the money we're setting aside for the 53 project, correct?
Well, it would be some of it. There would still be, of the 1,445,000, there's going to be 600,000.
So how do we, if the sales tax does not go through, which I hope we're all explaining the factual information on the sales tax, but in the event that the sales tax does not go through, we're going to be here next year, Joe's going to be here next year, and there is a possibility that I'm here next year too. How do we do next year's budget with the airport increase next year, with having to fund the second piece of Highway 53? What do we cut next year? I mean, I understand that we can get through this budget and we can make this one okay, but in the event that we don't get the sales tax, we have very slim possibility next year of getting through the same budget. I understand that some monies are going to have to come out of the permanent improvement. I understand that. How do we alleviate the long term on this? I mean, we can't just cut it all out this year and kick the can down to next year, and then next year, if we didn't get the sales tax, what do we do? I mean, at that point, we're cutting major services. So I see where you're going, and I respect that, but we can't just pull it all out of PI.
I'd like to address the topic of the tax base, because that's the underlying, if I may. And, you know, our tax base is shrinking, it continues to shrink. When we raise the levy, it does not make us more competitive in the area. But one of the ways cities have found to expand their tax base, like I say, these policies are statewide policies, so we're not alone in this suffering, we can say that. They have found it through the sales tax. And what that does is it distributes the burden beyond the city borders. So that is a politically more viable way to go. Otherwise, basically, if we're going to do infrastructure and not have a sales tax, we're looking at increasing the burden on our property taxpayers within the city sizably, a huge amount. So I hope, yes, that, you know, we can't, I'm just stating fact here. And that's the truth. Unless you can come up with another form of taxation, that's our choices.
Thank you. Just to make a factual point clear, is the total in the PI fund is $1,445,000. However, 800,000 of that is water and sewer, so it wouldn't be property tax based. The amount for the property tax is $645,000. So in the scenario to reduce the proposed levy of $937,000 in round numbers by $810,000 would not be possible just from the PI fund, because we only have $645,000 in the PI fund that's levy-based. So I just wanted to make that point.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask the city? Okay. We can't even find it there.
Well, we can find most of it. We would still need another 100 and some thousand, which, what other category, reserved for capital outlay, that we can cut the balance of that?
There's money been set aside in 402, which is the reserve for capital outlay.
That's the Highway 53 project?
We have different money set aside for equipment acquisition, future equipment replacement, vehicles, and that type of thing. On page 45 and 46.
At 175,000 is for the library?
Yes. Yes.
The county contributes virtually nothing to? Okay.
They contribute the minimum they're required to contribute.
That's a furnace, new furnace for the library.
Yes, I think it was going to a completing the steam heat system. It's in the notes on that page.
And if we remember correctly, when we were presented that by Public Works, if we do it now before it breaks, it'll be considerably cheaper and we'll be able to convert it. If it breaks this winter and we don't have everything on order and ready to go, we will be stuck with the same type of heating system as we've had for the last 30 years, which will be much more expensive to fix moving forward.
I do have another suggestion, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Please.
What do we have at the end? What's the projection for the general fund balance at the end of the year? Do we have wiggle room to pull down the general fund to help pull down from reserves to help balance this budget for this year? What can we pull out of there? We may have to do that. Is budget a drawdown?
Okay. I don't have that paperwork. Mayor Anderson had just asked if we have the paperwork of what percent the levy ends up being. I don't have that on me. So your suggestion is to draw down the general reserves?
If we can, I don't know what, the balance is. I think at the end of last year, it was 2.8 million. At the end of 2017, 0.8 if I recall. Do we have a financial statement we can look at? If we did not draw it down at all this year, the fact that we stayed within budget, we're probably looking at about 2.8 million. Our self-imposed discipline that the City Council passed as a resolution a number of years ago was that we would shoot for a 50% fund balance, a fund balance at the end of the year that's equal to 50% of our general fund budget. So, in this case, with a $5.5 million general fund balance, we'd be, without changing the resolution, which we can do, we would want to come in at about 2.7 million minimum if we were sitting at the end of 2017 at 2.8 million, I think we were, if I recall that number,
Close to the 50%.
then we could find 100,000 there, is what I'm saying. Of course, that's a short term, that's a one-year kind of deal. You can't do that indefinitely, but it is one way of getting this. You know, the way I feel is, I think many people are going to be surprised by the fact that we're in this predicament. And I think we need to give the taxpayers and the voters a chance to respond to this predicament. And by pulling down the general fund, we buy some of that time. And it gives us time to talk about revenue sources and the condition of the city and the tax base and what has happened economically over the last 30 years. But, you know, so I think maybe we balance it by pulling down the general fund if we can. If we need to change it to 40%, we can do that too, because I think the state law recommends no less than 40%. I'd like, you know, if we go below 40%, then the auditors may say something. And so I'd prefer not to get a negative on that.
I would make a suggestion, whatever we pull from our departments, we pull out of our appropriations too. If we pull 20%, 30%, we pull that off of the appropriations as well.
All the way down, including the airport?
Appropriation, that is not an appropriation. The rec department and the airport are both city entities that we're part of. So
We're cutting everywhere, but
I just think that if we, you know, obviously all this information is going to get out. It's already been in the paper that we started with a 39% increase, and now we're at a 36% increase, and we're talking about not doing it that much, and that makes sense. But when the citizens hear that we're talking about how we're going to cut from our permanent improvement and our streets and our water and everything else that we're doing, but yet we're still handing out what every entity is asking for, I think that that's going to look very foolish on our part, and I think it would be very foolish on our part.
Mr. Mayor.
Please.
Harley, Councilor Droba, this is the way I feel about some of this stuff. You know, when people are poor and they're struggling, and I think this city is, are you going to deny them all amenities? Are you going to deny people who are poor a chance to go to a movie or have a cell phone or that kind of thing? Is that something we're going to make people who are poor suffer? I don't think that that's the enlightened approach. I think the enlightened approach is to make sure that we have some amenities in the city even if we are poor. And so I see that appropriations list as some of the amenities the city can offer. You don't want to strip people of the ability to enjoy small things, right? And so to the point that the city makes that happen, I think we still have a role to play. Further, I don't think that those appropriations are going to, cutting them is going to solve our problem. Our problem is much more, it's much bigger than that. It's like if I am on the verge of bankruptcy in my own home, cutting out movie night isn't going to save me. We are not on the edge of bankruptcy. We don't have any debt. We're in strong shape financially. Let me backtrack that. But I'm saying that from the standpoint of trying to balance this budget, we are under the gun here. And cutting some small things in the way of giving joy and building amenities in the community just isn't going to solve the problem. If it did, I'd think about it. But so I sort of, you know, in the interest of, I mean, Councilor Droba has knocked himself out on this budget process this year. I'll go along with you on the 20% cut, just to recognize the hard work you've given to this. But my feeling is that, you know, we got to raise, that ultimately we got to do more than 5%. If we're ever going to come close to this, it's real. We got to look at drawing down reserves. And we got to look at big cuts in P&I and hope that the sales tax passes. I'm going to make a motion that we raise the levy percentage by 9%. Again, we can always cut it back, but we cannot increase it after today. So if we put it to 5%, we are putting ourselves in a real bind. We're not giving ourselves any wiggle room here. So I'll put the levy request now at 9%. 9% increase, yeah.
The motion, Councillor Jacksai, is to increase the tax levy by 9% for 2019 budget. And what would 9%, well, let's see if there's a second to the motion. Second to the motion?
I'll second for discussion.
Okay. Second by Councillor Droba. The City Administrator, what does a 9% increase in terms of dollars?
In even dollars, it's $230,488.
Councillor Droba.
I really have an issue with any of us making a motion to accept a levy number without having some basis of what we're cutting. I mean, if we're gonna, I mean, we can all throw out arbitrary numbers, and I'm not calling you out on that, but we can all throw out arbitrary numbers and then try to find the budget to get in between that. I understand that, but I want to have more concrete facts on what we're going to cut. It sounds like it's going to be permanent improvement. I don't want to set a levy rate today without all of us having some understanding of where this money is coming out of. We've met on a handful of occasions to try to get through the budget and whittle it down, and the best we got before today is to the 36%. Going into Monday, we were at 39%. What are we going to cut to get to this 9% levy increase? And if you can tell me in this discussion, and we have an amendment to put in what we're going to cut, I'll accept this. But if we don't know what we're cutting or a good idea of what we're cutting, I'm not going to vote for this.
Okay. That's fair enough. You're going to make us work here, really, thanks. Okay, Ken, what is the dollar amount we need to cut with a 9% levy increase?
$706,797.
$706,000, okay.
And $797.
Okay, we take 20% out of 20% out of appropriations, that's 20,000. If we take 100,000 from reserves, if we take
Which reserves out of our general fund?
reserves, yeah.
Okay.
If we take 645,000 out of that's
everything.
Well, we don't need everything. 120. We only need almost all of it. It would be, we're looking for 586,797 at this point. 645 would be more than enough. But I don't want to do 586 either, but we got some. Okay, so how much are you willing to consider, Mr. Droba, on the 645?
I just want to know what we're voting on, and I don't think it's fair. Well, let's go down memory lane. Let's talk about last year's budget really quick. Last year, we sat through budgets and we got pretty deep into it, and we asked all of the department heads to go back and see if there was anything they could eke out of the budget. And we had one department head that came in, and they cut a sizable amount of their budget, and that was Public Works. They cut a sizable amount without quitting any projects. They cut money out of fuel. They kind of changed how they were going to be managing some of their employees. They cut the largest amount out of their budget before they came here. And then right after they came here, we accepted all of their recommendations to cut out of the Public Works budget, and then we said, well, and we're going to cut this too because it makes it easy. Right after that, no department could cut anything out of their budget. And then we had a mistake on our council. There was a police car that didn't get funded. And guess what? We magically were able to come up with the money to do that because we made some cuts out of, I believe, fire. Am I correct on that, Ken?
No, we transferred money from the Shade Tree Fund over to the police department to do that, and we're paying that back in this budget, so it's overstated in this 1 year by about $57,000, round numbers.
But that's my point. We couldn't come up with the money. There was no money we could possibly squeak out of our budget. And then magically, in the 11th hour, we were able to get more money. And that's where my concerns are. We're going to take it out of, if we take all $645,000 out of that, where are we going to come up with the money for the 53 project if we don't pass? It's going to be more than 39% on our taxpayers next year. It would be more, it would probably be closer to 60% if we had to cover that cost next year and we don't have the...
I know. But Councilor Droba, we got to set a preliminary levy rate today.
Yeah, but that's till 11:59 p.m.
Well, I was going to work on some grants this afternoon, but I'll tell you what. I think that we don't have all the facts in yet. If the sales tax should pass, then this whole complexion changes. So what we do today is we pass a preliminary levy increase, and we see what happens. I mean, what else are we going to do? We see what happens in November. Now, let's say that fails. What does it look like? We have massive restructuring to consider if that happens. In other words, we have to think, I'm going to just speak some unspeakable things. It's not, I'm for this, but this is the kind of thing we'll be looking at. Turning our law enforcement over to the county and contracting with them. Setting up a taxing district for fire. Setting up a taxing district for the airport. Significantly down, and every taxing district takes city government, reduces city government and our voice, by the way. So taxing districts have a downside from the standpoint of governance. But those are the things we're going to be looking at. We are going to be looking at. And we can't grapple with those kinds of restructurings today. We're going to need 6 to 12 months to really look at that. So I think, and I hope I'm not overstating this because I don't want to be alarmist, but this is what I'm seeing. If anybody disagrees with me and say, Cynthia, you're way off the deep end, please say so because I hope I'm wrong.
I said that before.
Okay. But, I hope I'm wrong on this. But I think practically we got to do the best we can at this moment in time. And then look again in November. We have till December to finally set the final budget. But I think we're looking, if we don't do something about our tax base, we're not going to fix any problems. And this city, I'm going to say this, I think that the city employees are second to none. They work hard, they give it their all. The city council here has worked very hard. I applaud the mayor for the hours he puts in here. I don't want to hear from people that it's because we've not been diligent and because we've not worked hard, because we have. But, you know, the economics are what the economics are.
Please,
I've been quiet on this issue, and as I'm looking at this and reading through this, it's my understanding that we can cut and cut and cut to try and bring this down. Ultimately, there's going to be a cost, and it's going to be passed on to the residents of International Falls in one way or another. We can maybe pass the tax, maybe not pass the tax, but that money's going to have to come from somewhere. So it's either going to come from a raise of the levy, which could be argued that if the tax, say the sales tax fails, and this is going to be passed on in the levy, and then it's still going to be passed on to the taxpayers because rents are going to go up, everything's going to happen to your landlords aren't going to keep rent where they're at because the rent's going to go up. So the tax, even if you don't necessarily pay property taxes, you're still going to pay for this. So it's inevitable. Am I reading that properly, or am I off base?
You're
correct.
You're a quick study, Joe.
So if the sales tax doesn't pass and we have to increase the levy by this very large, eye-popping amount, it's going to get passed on to the taxpayers and to the residents of International Falls in one way or another. Rents are going to go up, things are going to get more expensive, services are going to become more expensive. That increase is going to be passed on. Am I correct in assuming that? So the hope would be that we could pass this and pass it on to not only the residents of International Falls, but maybe others can shoulder, visitors, and others can help shoulder that burden of infrastructure. Is that correct?
The sales tax does shift that burden across everyone who comes into the city and shops. And that includes not just the people who are permanent year-round residents, but tourists.
May I? Please. Just a point, I don't know that I've ever even questioned my tax bill when I go to one of these cities on the list. When I go to Duluth or any of these other places, I just pay. If I go and eat in a restaurant, I just pay it. I don't look at the rate. I don't even think about it when I'm traveling. I don't necessarily know that it would be a big deal. I've heard some say that they will shop out of town. If you look at that list that was distributed, most of the major shopping areas, for example, if you go to Duluth to shop or Hermantown, they both have a tax use. So Miller Hill Mall, in any of the shops in Duluth, Bemidji, I see Grand Forks is on here. Any of these places that you may go to do your shopping, I understand that Grand Rapids has one proposed. So these major areas, and St. Louis County has the tax itself. So if you're in Virginia or Hibbing or any of those locales, Beltrami County has one. So if you're over in Bemidji, you're paying this whether you leave town to do your shopping or not. You're just gonna give it to another county.
another county and city.
Another county or city is gonna receive those funds.
Well, I think, Councilor Kraus, you're exactly right. If the sales tax doesn't pass, I think we have two other options. One, as you pointed out, we can increase the levy to try to raise enough funds to be able to do some projects in the city, including Highway 53. Or we could come back to the citizens with a request to do a bond issue, including Highway 53 and maybe some other improvements that we see that are really necessary right now. Here again, that's going to fall only on the citizens and businesses of International Falls if we do a bond issue.
And when you pay it back, which you have to,
You have to.
where's that money coming from?
Well, it's going to come from the citizens and businesses of International Falls,
Which is the levy rating?
which is a levy rate increase. Please.
I mean, we can set the preliminary levy today at a rate, and we can certainly, at some point after the election, we can always bring it down. Is that correct?
Yes,
So-
we will be making a final decision on the, in December, city council meeting.
So basically, the decision is, we can leave the voters?
No.
No, I mean, if we set the levy where we set it, and then if the tax was to be voted in, then we could always potentially lower the levy, or no?
But I think you're on the right page. I think the issue is if, well, it wouldn't matter. I mean, realistically, if we're going to be cutting the $645,000 out of reserves and the $20,000 out of appropriations, that's how we get to the 9%. So we couldn't lower it any more than that. I mean, go ahead.
Councilor Jackson's first motion was to increase it by the 36%.
No, it's 10%.
Oh, the first motion.
Yeah, it was only 10 points.
I thought you said,
No.
I thought you said I thought you wanted to adopt the levy that was proposed here.
No.
Oh,
I didn't
okay.
say that. I
All right.
said 10 points. 10%.
So, but if we were...
I'll let you
if we-
pass.
But if, I guess to go to Councilor Kraus's, if we were to adopt the levy that's stated here in Exhibit A at $3,498,000, it would be almost a 37% increase. That would allow for the $645,000 that we're looking at for permanent improvements. So then if you want to go back and if you want to drop that today and then go back and reduce it in December, depending on the vote, on the sales tax vote, why, that is a possibility. But that's an awful big increase.
Mr. Mayor?
I think that's bigger than probably any city in the state's going to have.
We'll hit the Minneapolis paper. Above the fold. Although it might send a message to the state legislature about just how dire rural Minnesota is, but I don't think we can do that because we won't do it. I mean,
I won't do it.
I wouldn't vote for it.
we wouldn't do it. So we got to be real, and I think ultimately 10 points I could live with. I know nobody wants to go there, but let's start with a realistic levy increase and then see what happens by the time December rolls around.
The motion on the floor is 9%.
Oh, 9, okay, whatever.
I just wanted to...
That's correct.
9% then.
And that's $230,488 in terms of dollars. And then I guess I would ask the question of the councilors, if the sales tax passed, would we reduce from 9% to something less?
Again, I would be open to that. I would be open to that, but where are we going to cut it? That's my bottom line issue. If we're going to cut right now at 9%, $645 out of our future capital improvement projects, where are we going to cut the other $200,000?
We don't have to worry about that until after November 6th.
You guys are so optimistic. I'm very optimistic on it too, but I want to be a little bit more set in reality of what we're moving towards. So I can accept that.
9?
I can accept 9 if we're talking about pulling $100,000 out of the general fund, cutting $20,000 out of the appropriations, and then pulling something else out of our departments. I can accept that. But I also want to ask one question. On the 809 fund, the Economic Development Fund, for the $49,000 that's in expenditures, $45,000 in revenues, we're showing a $4,000 decrease to our general fund.
No, that would be 809 fund.
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, I thought you said general fund, okay.
$4,000.
Yeah, there's 49
in-
expenditure, and so where does that money come from, that 4,000 that we...
Drawing down that fund balance, which is how much?
That's right, I remember that, okay.
Do we know yet what's sitting in there? What's sitting in the 809 account right now in the fund balance? I mean, eventually that fund balance is going to go away.
I'm sure it's got a financial statement there.
I have the July financial statement through the end of July of this year, and it shows in the Economic Development Fund, Fund 809, that there's a ending balance of $130,770
Okay,
and some cents.
I got you, I just wanted to know where that money was coming from. So I will accept the 9%, given those requirements that we, so I would make an amendment that $100,000 comes out of, to make this 9%, $100,000 comes out of the general fund, and $20,000 comes out of the appropriations.
Is that an amendment to my
Yes.
motion? I accept it as a friendly amendment.
We have an amendment. Is there a second to the amendment?
I'll second that.
Second by Councillor Kraus. I guess I would want to know, where is the 20,000 coming out of appropriations?
It would be 20% off of everything. That was
Percent or 20,000?
20%.
20% of 99,000 is 20,000.
It's really close.
Real close.
Mayor, I just need to have something clarified. So the motion is to,
It is, isn't it?
19,800.
the amendment to the motion is to have
100,000 come from general fund reserves, so we would reduce the reserves by 100,000 to balance the budget, and 20,000 would come out of the appropriations.
And the difference between a 9%, essentially what you're doing is reducing the levy below 9% by $100,000 because you're allowing your general fund balance to be spent down instead of increasing the levy. So the levy won't be a 9% increase, it'll be...
The levy would be 230,000.
Okay.
We'd be taking an additional 100,000 from general fund reserves and 20,000 from cutting from this appropriation figure of 99,000. That would go down to 79. The balance would have to come from, I assume, 401, but we haven't had that discussion yet. Because there's still going to have to be some...
There's still going to have to be funds
some
cut somewhere else,
reduction.
and I can accept that, but if we're going to cut from our budget, I think we need to cut from what we give other people too.
And I would guess that that's about 300,000, is what I would see that figure, because we got 230,000 with a 9% increase, 100,000 from the general reserves, and about 20,000. So those figures together should be about 350,000, and 401 PI is at 645 increase. That would drop to 300,000. That would leave 300,000 there with what we're doing.
Can we revisit it one more time? Sure. Okay, so to go from a 37% increase to a 9% increase, we got to find 26%, right? Of 937,000. We got to find 74% of that.
I've run some numbers, I think, so if we want to find out how to come up with 937,285, that's what we have for a dollar increase now. The numbers that you've identified, we'll use $100,000 from the general fund reserves, $230,488 would be earned in new money with a 9% levy. We'll make $20,000 cuts from the other appropriations that we've identified. that leaves, so that total is $350,488. So we need to come up with $586,797 monies to cut from other departments then to,
Analysis. So 586,000, and the mayor's proposing taking 300,000 of that 586,000 out of P&I?
My motion is, I don't care where everything else comes out of. If we pull, my only thing that I'm stipulating on my motion, or my amendment is, take $100,000 out of the general fund, and we pull 10%, which technically is not the $20,000, but if it makes it easier for everyone, call it $20,000. After that, we can make our decisions in the future on where else we're pulling, but today we're stating that $100,000 comes out of the general fund and $20,000 comes out of the appropriations. And I just want to make one point on the appropriations. The one that we are locked into is the senior center of 2,000, because that is a written agreement. So I'm really sorry, but that is one that it cannot come out of.
How many years left on that contract?
Forever.
Oh, it's got a limit.
I believe it was a 30-year agreement.
30 years, I don't know where we are, but, okay. Is there a second? I made the motion, you made the amendment? There is a second. Okay. I call the question.
Just trying to understand where the money is coming out of the appropriation area. So we've got 97,000.
So if you took 20% off of everything but the senior center, you would have 800 for the music in the park, 2,000 for the senior center,
24,800.
24,800, yep.
48,000 for Bacchus, and 4,000 for KCC TV.
79,600.
That's what it would be. And I do think, I'm going to repeat this, but I know it isn't going to go anywhere, but when I looked at the operations budget at the airport, it increased approximately 280 to 320. That's $40,000. In addition, we have a capital outlay, which we're locked into. Capital outlay because we have a whole lot of grant money pending on that. We're not going to throw that away. So it's the operations part of that where I think there's some flexibility and management opportunity out there. So I would recommend that we cut 40 out of that budget, and but we can argue about that later. But I noticed in the airport budget that I keep hearing that employments have gone up, but yet the total revenues from ticket sales at $350 per head is the same as it was in 18. So I'm wondering if that's understated in revenues. I think, I don't know what we're going to do with international flights, but I think there's something we can do there, I hope. Come up with 40,000 there and make it a $25 landing fee. You could come up with $40,000.
City Administrator, can you give us one more time what this budget is going to look like?
I will recite what I see as the changes being proposed of this motion is, again, the 9% levy increase that was the original motion would generate $230,488 in levy dollars for 2019, or an increase of that amount. It's proposed in the amendment that we reduce the general fund balance by $100,000, and that we appropriate 20%, which is just under $20,000 from the appropriations that we have identified for music in the park. Senior Center is set at the minimum contract rate, so that can't change. The Bronco Foundation Museum, Citizens for Bacchus AB, and KCC TV. All of them except for the Senior Center would receive a 20% decrease. And it leaves about $486,000, almost $487,000 to cut from other line items in the budget between now and the time when we adopt the final budget in December.
So where is the 486,000 that we are at this point short?
586.
586, excuse me.
Well, some of it would come out of the 645. And we don't know where the rest is coming at this point.
We agree that we're taking the 586 out of 401 then?
Can we say tentatively?
Tentatively, I would be okay with that. But I'd like to have additional meetings on that, but I'm very okay with tentatively to say that for right now.
Well, I'm not going to support the amendment or the motion. I think
I did call the question, though.
I understand. So the amendment is to take 100,000 from general reserves and 20,000 from appropriations. Part of the 9% increase.
Correct.
Okay. All right, so the motion that, to amend that we would be voting on first is to reduce the general fund reserves by 100,000 and reduce the appropriations from 99,000 to 79,000.
Well, not quite 79.
It was 20%.
Is it 20% or 20,000?
Well, it wasn't, I was using 20,000 as a rough estimate of 20% of 99,000, but if you're not going to reduce the senior center at all, it's going to be,
I would go to 79,600.
So that appropriations will be 79,600.
Correct.
Okay. All right, so does everyone understand the motion on the amendment? Question?
Aye.
I would vote no. And then we would go to the main motion, and that is to have a 9% increase with the amendment having passed of 100,000 from the general fund and appropriation amount of 79,600. And if I understand that correctly, we would have a permanent improvement levy of about 60,000, 59 or 60,000.
Tentatively, we're going to still have discussion
Yep.
on that.
Okay. Prepared for the question. Everyone understands the question now? 9% increase, 100,000 from general reserves, and appropriations of 79.6. Question?
Aye.
Aye.
I would vote no. Motion carries. Budget and preliminary levy are, and I don't have the figure there for what the levy is going to be, but it's a 9% increase over 2018 of $230,488.
Mayor, I think based on the numbers that I had run when we first made the motion, which was some time ago, I show the levy proposed after adoption of this motion of $2,791,464. And that should represent an increase over the levy for 2018 of $230,488. Based on the last motion then, I had put and included in the packet a draft resolution that would need to be revised with those new numbers for you to adopt, and then the resolution would be what we would forward to the county auditor, and by statute that's required to be received by him by September 30th. So we would send it over there on Friday or before, and there's some other informational items that are required, or decisions that are required on the part of the city council as part of this, submitting this preliminary tax levy. So the points would be is that we have to set a meeting where we can take public input on the proposed budget, and the proposed budget would be what you've adopted today. That meeting can't be before November 24th, so I've proposed in this draft resolution in number 1, under the be it further resolved, that the meeting would be set at 6:00 p.m. on Monday, December 3rd, which is the first Monday in December, and our regular city council meeting would be at 4:30, and then the Truth in Taxation public input meeting would be at 6:00 on that same day. And 6:00 is the earliest we can hold that meeting by state statute. So I'm proposing that, and that would be the same as what we've done in past years. And then after we take public comment and input at that meeting, if there's any changes that the city council want to make, staff would make those changes, and then we would have the final resolution for council action on the 2019 final budget and levy, and that would be at the 4:30 meeting on Monday, December 17th. And then, again, by statute, we're required to have that to the county auditor on or before December 28th. So I'm asking that you adopt this resolution with the change in the preliminary levy to the amount I mentioned before. I believe it's $2,791,464.
Correct. That's what I have.
I would make that motion as outlined by the city administrator.
Motion by Councillor Droba to adopt the resolution approving the preliminary tax levy collectible 2019, setting the final budget and levy public input meetings as stated in the resolution, and that the preliminary tax levy figure would be $2,791,464.
I'll second.
Second by Councillor Kraus. Discussion on the motion or the resolution. So again, the dates would be to have the public input meeting on December 3rd at 6 p.m. and that the council would consider adoption of the final 2019 budget, excuse me, at the December 17th meeting. Further questions or discussion? Question?
Aye.
Aye.
I would vote yes. Motion is carried. Resolution is adopted. There being no other business for this special meeting, the meeting is adjourned.